PowerPoint presentation, it wants it so that if I have the show being full screen, I can't see all of you, and I want to see all of you and see the show. And so I don't know. I'm sure that Katie or Zach could solve it like that, or my 10-year-old who's asleep downstairs could as well. But I'm trying to figure out what to do so that it doesn't show the presenter view over here. Any any
I would
young
say
folks know how to do that?
show the show.
But then I can't see everybody.
That's going to be life.
Uh, I also can't see Zoom in order to share my screen that way. Oh wait, I figured it out. Never mind. I'm amazing. Okay, here we go. Okay, I solved it. All right. Actually, I think Dad, technically you're starting.
Okay. So this is about a different topic. For many years, since Ray was 10, so many years, we have been studying the money of World War II and the various camps. There were thousands of camps in World War II, tens of thousands of camps. The U.S. alone had 1,000 camps. Many of those for POWs, many of those for civilians. Some of them were for German citizens and Japanese citizens and Italian citizens who were in the United States. But shamefully, some of these camps were for Japanese Americans. These were American citizens. I think a lot of you know the story that President Roosevelt agreed to issue a directive rounding up Japanese Americans who were put into assembly centers at first, and then eventually to relocation centers, camps, in the interior of the United States, as far east as Arkansas. Over 100,000 American citizens, I'm talking about. Well, when they lived in these camps for years, they used money. And the money speaks about what happened. It's very personal, of course, to people. So this is a talk about the money used by Japanese Americans and the story of the Japanese Americans in internment camps in World War II. For example, well, Barbara's saying something. Barbara wants me to turn up the volume. Can people hear me?
Yeah, I think you have to turn up your own volume, Mom.
Yeah,
So
it's a little soft.
I just raised it a little bit.
I have my volume turned up, right? And I have
But
my
I
hearing
don't,
aids on.
the volume doesn't control your, like, I can only control what I hear. I can't control the volume. He could talk louder, but,
Right, that's what I'd like him to do.
oh, I see.
Well, let
Yes.
me continue anyway. This is not
Well,
going it.
just maybe just to say briefly, context-wise, also that so we came here and many of you were here, I think, and we spoke a bit about money used by in camps that were mainly Jewish people in Europe in World War II.
Yep.
And this feels like in this, day and age, the idea of never again is really important. And it's also really important to think about the full picture of what happened then, even by people who we feel were the good guys, and to really think about how bias and stereotypes and so on can lead to real problems and disruptions and pain for people. So just to give that context for why we feel like this is also an important part of the story.
Next slide.
Okay.
Uh, our trips were sponsored by what's called the Eric Newman Numismatic Portal at Washington University in St. Louis. So we acknowledge them. Can you hear me, Katie? Okay. So here we are at the Japanese American Museum in downtown Los Angeles, in Little Tokyo. This museum houses many of the artifacts we'll show from Japanese American camps. As we said, they have a lot of the script, coupons, tokens, ration cards. People lived in these camps for years and had all sorts of different kinds of money. So there we are.
Hey,
I
Ray,
like,
Ray, when you switched it for 1 second and then switched it back, it was much better to see when you switched it, if you know what I mean.
I
Because
don't know.
right now I'm not seeing the right side I'm not seeing you guys. Did you
most
do
people
something
see,
for like a
but we don't
second?
know if it's you or if it's others. I
Yeah.
see Ray and I perfectly.
Oh, okay, then it's just me. Then that's okay.
Uh, I don't know. Let me ask Mitch. Mitch, can you see Ray and me perfectly?
Yeah, I was on full screen.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So I think it's you, Rick. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
All right. Anyway, this is the front of the Japanese American Museum in Little Tokyo, Los Angeles. My hat, by the way, is a Dodger hat, the Brooklyn Dodgers.
Yep.
All right. Go ahead, Ray. This is the archivist, Jamie, at the Japanese American Museum. We're in the archives now. And that tray, that movable tray there, those are the boxes of the artifacts from the camps, which we went through for hours. She was extremely helpful. And yes, those boxes have the money inside of them. And there's Ray opening up the folders within each of the boxes. And she did a sort. What Jamie did is do a search on things having to do, keywords having to do with money, ration cards, tokens, coupons. And then Ray is deciding what's relevant, and she would hand it to me. Next slide. And then I would photograph it. So you can see next to me there are the artifacts, or the actual ration items. Yes, Ray is pointing to them. You can see them. And we took hundreds of photos. They were extremely helpful. Go ahead, Ray. We think we got the guy in the middle. So that's our designated driver the next day as we went to Santa Anita Racetrack, which was a camp in World War II, and Pomona Fairgrounds in Los Angeles, which was another camp, an assembly center as well. Here we are near Hollywood, and so Rick drove us around, and there we go.
Spent a great day. Spent an outstanding day driving around.
You'll notice my shirt is from the museum in Arkansas, which Katie will describe soon. The Japanese American Internment Camp Museum. Actually, well, if you go back a second, very quickly, we went to a concert at the Hollywood Bowl. It was great, Harry Connick Jr. And if you can believe this, as we're leaving, the same day, by the way, we went to the concert later in the day. I had the shirt on. A survivor of one of the camps saw it, and we had a little chat. Yes, can you believe that happened at the Hollywood Bowl?
Small world.
Yeah. Next, map of the various kinds of camps involving Japanese American imprisonment during World War II. Look, even Ellis Island had some Japanese citizens and Japanese Americans in it. They had a lot of German Americans and German citizens in it. But if you head toward the west, that's where most of the camps were. And the symbols represent different kinds of camps. Those run by the Justice Department, the stars. The assembly centers, the little dots. So if Ray can point to Santa Anita and Pomona, two representative camps near Los Angeles that we visited with Rick being the expert driver. What we did was we got him slippery shrimp, I'll say, for lunch at one point.
Yep.
In payment for his time and effort. You can see the triangles represent the relocation centers, which means those are the camps where people stayed for years. They were built hastily. You'll see the line starting from the Canadian border and heading toward the Mexican border. That was the exclusion zone on the left on the West Coast, where Japanese Americans and Japanese citizens, mainly Japanese Americans, were not allowed to be.
Can you tell me what each of those types of camps did? Those centers? What's
We
an
will.
Oh,
We're,
okay.
but yeah, we're going to do that during the talk.
Okay, great,
Part of the
thanks.
story. Also, you might look at Alaska, which had one camp on this map. It actually had more than one camp. The Aleutian people were put in camps as well, and that's a whole other story. We've been in touch with one museum there. We won't get into that tonight, but it's a parallel story to the Japanese American camps. The Aleutians were American citizens, are American citizens, so I would call them more probably maybe Aleutian Americans. And there was a camp in Hawaii. All right, go ahead, Ray. This is the infamous notice for people of Japanese ancestry. Their instructions basically they're going to be rounded up and shipped out. Go ahead, Ray. So they had to sell their stores, their goods. Um, this guy says, "I am an American," and I have no doubt he was an American. He was still so. This is the Wanto company. He was still rounded up and sent out. Go ahead. You can see that the company has been sold.
All right. So
Okay, go ahead,
in
Ray.
because we anticipated that my wonderful mother would want to know, we're going to now talk about all the different types of camps and give you some examples so that you have a sense of it. And I think throughout, it's worth keeping that lens in mind again of the similarities to what the Jewish people experienced, even though it doesn't go as extreme, of course. And thank goodness, should never have gone that extreme for anybody, but you can still see some similarities. And it's worth keeping in mind that the people going through this, the Japanese American people going through this, are also hearing about what's happening in Europe. And that's contributing to the fear that they're feeling as everyone's trying to figure out what it is that's happening in the world. So first, we're going to talk about the assembly centers. So these are the most hastily formed places. So as that notice goes out and as people are starting to be rounded up, they have to go somewhere. Uh, and so and this is large numbers of people you can see, but it's short-lived. This is all happening in 1942, right after Pearl Harbor, basically is when, all this, runs into motion. And you can see that some of them were quite large, including Santa Anita, which we visited, which had 18,719 people at its maximum. That's a lot of people. And I don't know if people here have been to the races at Santa Anita, but to picture people living there is an important part of this story. And as you saw on the map, these are all much closer in because this is all happening quickly. So here's a quote. Henry went to the control station to register the family. He came home with 20 tags, all numbered 10,710 tags to be attached to each piece of baggage and one to hang from our coat lapels. From then on, we were known as family number 10,710. And here you can see a picture of a family, and they've all got their tags that they're wearing and the tags on their bags as they're getting ready to leave. Here is one of the tags that we saw in the museum in Los Angeles. And then while they were in these camps, people were paid. They, depending on their what they could contribute. So $8 a month for unskilled people, $12 a month if you were skilled, and $16 a month for professionals, assuming you were working 40 hours a week. And obviously there's, the value of money has changed over time, but this would still be low at the time, especially if you think of, a doctor, as an example, working for $16 a month at 40 hours a week. They had, I mean, and I think this is similar. In some ways, you could think of this like the ghettos to some degree of people, the way that people come together and they figure out how to make things function. So they set up shoe repair shops, barber shops, and they used these coupons as a way to pay for things. So when we first started looking at this story, all we knew were these descriptions, and then over time we've gotten to see examples and more examples and better understand how things worked. But they did use money. They used like US dollars. They used these coupons and they also had ration books like everybody had in the United States at the time. So a lot of the information that we have comes from the newspapers, a lot of which have been made available now online and they're searchable. Um, we had started looking at this a long time ago. Katie came in and helped us do this in a more organized fashion, which was extremely helpful. But through these newspaper accounts, we can see how this life started to come together and how people are trying to figure things out and trying to you can see your sectional heads hold first meet. People are organizing, they're trying to get representatives, they're trying to figure out how they enjoy themselves too. Here we've got people, if you can believe it, they're buying war bonds for the United States. They're imprisoned by the United States and they're buying war bonds because they want to support the United States war effort. And here we see them getting ready for their first payday and trying to figure out how that's going to go. And it talks a lot about the things they're going to spend their money on. So this is a work card. This is from Santa Anita. There were a lot of people with this job of weaver making nets. And this is each day saying how many hours they worked. So this is like a time card that was made. Here is somebody's work assignment card that has that number that you heard about before. And then it's got where they're going to be working. So this person's working in mess operations as a dishwasher. You can see that they're getting $16 a month as their rate of pay. They also got an allowance, and you can see it was in script or coupons. So those are the coupons that we'll show you in a little bit, depending on age. And you can see a family's got $7.50 a month. So this is even if you don't have a job, this is money that you have to spend. And here are people getting their coupon books at the assembly center. Some things you needed the coupons for, so you would actually have to take your money and buy coupon books so that you could then use the coupon books within the camp. Here is in the newspaper, they're talking about the coupons, and here's a picture of what the coupon books look like. And they're talking about how you need to buy these to replace your cash. Similar for those who were here before for our talk on the camps that Jewish people were in, they also wanted people to have money in the camp as a way to control things. And if you make people spend their dollars to buy coupon books, that is going to limit, I mean, and these were not in great locations to escape per se, but you're not going to be able to do much if you're out and about with these coupon books outside of the campsites. So here's a close-up of that picture. And you can see that they're explaining that within these books, and you'll see them in a moment, but there are 10, 5, 2, and 1 cent little coupons. So here, this is from the American Red Cross at the time, saying there is a great financial insecurity. Many families have lost heavily in the sale of property. Savings are dipped into for the purchase of coupon books to be used at the center store. And with the depletion of savings comes a mounting sense of insecurity and anxiety as to what will be done when the money is gone. Doubtless the greatest insecurity is that about post-war conditions. Many wonder if they will ever be accepted in Caucasian communities. And again, similar to Europe, as people are having to go to these camps, they're having to figure out what they do with their homes, with their belongings, with their businesses, and sometimes trying to sell things, sometimes giving them to people, sometimes having to just give them up. There were a lot of losses. So here is an actual coupon book. And you can see on the inside, and probably the reason that this one still exists is because they hadn't quite spent it all. So there's one little coupon left. This is a very similar model to what was used in the POW camps also. And in order to spend it, it had to be in the book. You couldn't just come with a little coupon. You had to bring the whole book, and then the cashier would pull the coupons out. So you kept it all intact. And here you can see these have been, it says issued on the back because once you've pulled it out, you're done using it. But here are some of the 2-cent coupons. And now I'm gonna let Dad talk for a little bit.
So if you go to Santa Anita, which is a lovely racetrack, we went on an off day, so they didn't have racing, and the guards let us in, which surprised me a little bit. You'll see this plaque, and next to the plaque is one of these QR codes, which works. So if you have your phone, you can actually use it, and you'll get a history of the internment in World War II. Even as I'm speaking to you, you take your phone and take the camera and just take a picture of it, you'll see it. Anyway, it says early in 1942, the U.S. government designated Santa Anita Park for special usage during the war years. And it goes on to describe what happened, and that this plaque was from 2001. Go ahead, Ray.
Oh, wait a second. That's the wrong spot.
Oh, that's correct.
This is the right spot.
That's correct. That's the entrance to Santa Anita Racetrack. It looks like the museum picture, but it's not. Same two people, same shirt, but the entrance to Santa Anita Racetrack, and the plaque is just on this little grassy area here. Go ahead, Ray. So this is where they check horses today with vets. In World War II, they checked human beings with doctors. So they checked the people coming into the 15,000 people coming into the camp were medically examined in part in this building.
Almost like the selection process that took place at concentration camps in Europe.
With far less consequence, but yes.
Yes, absolutely.
But still dehumanizing. Go ahead, Ray. Santa Anita Racetrack. We actually went into the track to take a look. Very pleasant, as you can tell. And next to the go ahead. This is where the horses are kept. We got as far as the gate, and then as soon as we tried to drive through, they said, "Oh, you can't go there." So we came out and made a left turn and drove along the road out of the park. I like this picture.
Yeah, I do too.
That's Ray. How should I phrase it? They didn't encourage her to take pictures of the buildings that were part of the camp in World War II, but she got some anyway. The hard part. Go ahead. And
she was not going to be denied.
She was not going to be denied. So this is one of her pictures from there. I like it because you can see kind of the shrubbery and what appears to me to be the original buildings.
And to note, it was a racetrack, then it was a camp, then it went back to being a racetrack. So when the people were there, they were literally living in horse barns with manure on the ground. I mean, totally dehumanizing.
Let's keep going, Ray. So I'm not sure who's supposed to speak at this point, but this is from an inmate, kind of taking pictures of the scenes from Santa Anita. Go ahead, Ray. This is a sad story. So now this is a receipt that we got at the museum. The government forced this guy to sell his car. You can see for a 1932 car at a very cheap price, just $50. He was not happy. The archivist told us that when he sold the car to this guy, S. Sahara, that was the last time he drove in his life.
And he had driven to, like, they say you have to show up at this place at this time. So he drove there in his
Yeah.
truck, and then they then had to sell it.
Go ahead. So I think you can see the government had created 6 mess halls to feed us, coded by colors, green, blue, and orange. Each mess hall had 3 assigned times to eat each meal, 30 minutes apiece. For example, breakfast times were from 6 to 6:30, 6:30 to 7, 7 to 7:30, and the time we ate was according to the meal tickets or the form of money we were given. That was apparently the only way the government could figure out how to feed nearly 20,000 prisoners daily. Fortunately, the food actually wasn't that bad, but the noise level in the dishwashing area was ear-shattering. One can imagine. Go ahead.
Um, I'll just mention very briefly that I don't have pictures of this in here, but we also went to see a baseball game, a Dodgers game, on Japanese American culture night. And George Takei threw out the first pitch, who was himself in an internment camp as a kid, and then this woman who is the oldest living Japanese American in the country. She threw out an opening pitch as well. And so this is from her memoir, which I got after the game, because she talked, they talked a lot about the internment camps at the game. She was a very positive person. I've heard from other accounts that the food maybe wasn't that great, but she appreciated it, which is nice.
So this is in fact one of the original mess hall tickets that the Japanese American Museum had. Go ahead. Obviously, those are meals. There's another one. And when you got your meal, they punched it. Apparently, she had a day off on Wednesday. There was one day, no meals, or this person didn't get up on Saturday morning for breakfast. Looks like. Go ahead, Ray. Oh, not Sunday morning. Sorry, no, Saturday morning. We did take a sneak peek at the modern day racetrack on its off day. Go ahead, Ray. So now I believe I'm doing Pomona, and then we'll go from there. Pomona was another assembly camp, and this one had an interesting story for us. So we drove there. Rick drove us there, and there is another plaque just outside the administration building. So then we decided, well, we might as well go in the administration building and see what they have. So we go in there, and the attendant there says, "What do you want?" And we said, "We want to know about the assembly center for World War II." He goes in and he comes out with the information person, sort of the PR person. And in the next slide, there she is. There's Rick. There's me. Ray's taking the picture. She gets into this golf, sort of extended golf cart thing, and she drove us around the Pomona Fairgrounds to show us the sights. So this is her getting ready to drive us. There's Rick. These are the Pomona Fairgrounds. So this was at that time part of the camp. Go ahead. Now this is interesting. This is the parking lot of the modern day Pomona Fairgrounds. And behind are those mountains. They said what mountains they were. I forgot already. Maybe you guys know better than me. And she said this particular view from this angle is what the survivors said they could see from their houses. So this spot, which is now the parking lot, was the camp.
And it was interesting because what she said was that, as they were going around and everything has changed and they're, sort of trying to make sense of it. This is much, much later that they were visiting. They're filming a documentary, but they were saying that the only thing that didn't change are the mountains. The view is the same because, of course, the mountains are the same. So it's very powerful.
And, so we're going back to Ray now, I believe.
Sure. So one of the really interesting things that happened um, at the relocation centers, those were the longer term camps that people went from the assembly centers. Once things were a little bit more organized, they were sent to the relocation centers. And if you remember from the map, these are now far away from anything. They're, later Katie's going to talk about two that are in the middle of nowhere in Arkansas, which is, first of all, in the middle of nowhere, and second of all, far away from California or from Washington or from Oregon. People really being moved to places where, any fear of them spying or attacking or anything is depleted significantly. Um, and in almost all of these locations, they set up co-ops basically to be able to have more say over what they had available in the shops, to be able to take some control over people's jobs and so on, so they were more in charge rather than having to depend on the Americans. The including that these things like food and so on, they wanted things that were more specialized. So here you can see this is a ration coupon that's a US ration coupon, not special for the camp. This is the regular OPA form. And these would have been used then also. One of the things we learned from the newspaper reports was that there was a big issue with shoes, and they weren't getting the shoe ration cards or that they needed, and they needed shoes, and so they were trying to figure out what to do about it. And here you can see this is a sugar certificate that's been changed over for shoes at a place called Heart Mountain.
So Ray,
Yeah,
we need to move a little bit. This is
because
good,
it's
but
late.
we're
Yeah,
at 9:40. So
you're right.
yeah.
So here they are talking about the shoe stamps. I'll try to calm down the details.
Okay, but just so you know.
And here you see somebody. This here is a shoe stamp, and this is somebody getting permission to leave one of the camps in Idaho. Here you see people in one of the co-ops, um, all set up. Here you have the staff from this is sort of like a canteen grocery store. This is from a yearbook. Um, so I'll try to be quick, but they set up a system sort of like if you go to CVS and, if you buy enough things, then you get, money back, extra care bucks. So they said, we're going to use these special coupons and it keep the receipts, and that's how you'll get your money back if you contributed to the co-op. But people kind of ignored that at first, and just kind of threw them away. Well, so the the guy whose job was to be the custodian collected them all. So when the first month came up and it was time for them to get their refund, this guy got a ton of money back, and everybody else said, "Oh, wait a second," and then they started saving their coupons. And here's an example of one of the coupons. So you can see they're not fancy, but this came from a scrapbook. We were very excited to finally get to see an example of one. And here's somebody later, they're keeping this is their stamp book for the Minidoka Consumers Cooperative from one of the camps in Idaho to keep track of how much they spent. And here's another person who has gotten a refund back. This is the receipt saying how much they got back.
That's from California, Manson.
This is someone's co-op card to show that they're a member, and that they can go see the movies.
And she's 12 years old.
Movie pass. More pictures of the staff for the co-op. This is another movie ticket with a federal tax, you can see. Here's someone getting a paycheck that's working for a camouflage net company for
Outside
the
the
war
camp.
effort.
Much better pay, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh.
And there were people eventually who were doing jobs off site like that. All right, go ahead, Dan.
So Justice Department camps were run by was separate and included camps for Japanese Americans, Italian Americans, and German Americans. Yeah, right. So again, these are coupons for the stores. I think this one's from Lordsburg. EAI, this is New Mexico. EAI is Enemy Alien Internment Camp, run by the Department of Justice. So at that time, there were companies that printed these coupons like movie tickets. It was much different than today. The companies were specialized in that. So here we are. That's Ray's hand, I think,
Yeah.
at the Japanese American Museum. So we're taking a picture of the coupon booklet. Beer card. That's a form of money. This guy. How should I phrase it? It looks like he erratically got the beer. And now we're going to go to Katie. You can see that the people in this particular assembly center learn where they're going to the relocation camp. Movement, it's Arkansas. Movement to Jerome will begin October 14th, 1942. It says in the fine print. All right, Katie.
If I could interrupt for 1 second, I just want to make 2 quick points. And the first one is that when you were saying how amazing it is that they were buying war bonds, what amazes me even more is that people that were in these camps still volunteered. Those who were of the right age would volunteer for military service. That always amazed me. The other thing that blew me away, the day that we drove around, we started at Santa Anita, really didn't get any help. It's like the guys really didn't know anything. And well, there's a plaque over there, and you can go over there, and you can't go over there. So we left to go to the LA County Fairgrounds, and I didn't expect much. We got there, man. The lady couldn't wait to talk to us and loved us and put us on her, as you saw on the golf cart, and drove us all around and told us everything she knew. It was great. So anyhow, just want to throw that in. I'm sorry,
And
Kate, go ahead.
not
that,
only
yeah.
Japanese Americans in the camps volunteer, but they were part of the most decorated
Yes.
group.
442nd.
Yeah.
But didn't they get freedom for that?
Sort
I mean,
of, they
on the
were-
way out.
Yeah, after the war.
Everybody
Yeah,
got freedom after the war.
It was also
After
complicated.
George Floyd.
It's a longer story, but it's also complicated because they were asked if they would be willing to volunteer, and there was a lot of worry about if you said no, would that mean that then you were seen as suspicious, and what should you do, and should you fight for a country that has imprisoned you? But if you say you won't, then are they going to be suspicious of you? And it was a big to do. But I'll let Katie talk.
Yeah.
I'll interrupt one more time. They were the most decorated regimental battalion in the history of the Army. They served in Europe under terrible conditions. They were heroes, and that was a way they could get out of the camp. But they definitely didn't go to freedom at that point. They went to fight in Europe. All right, Katie, finally, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, we can go to the next slide. Thank you for the introduction. So here's a little story that we found at the museum. I assume that there'll be a picture of the museum in here at some point, but we went to a museum in Arkansas. And this is one of the stories from it, that Brower was far enough south to catch Gulf Coast hurricanes, far enough north to catch Midwestern tornadoes, close enough to the Mississippi River to be inundated by Mississippi Valley floods, and lush enough to be a haven for every creepy, crawly creature and pesky insect in the world. As I think Steve or Ray mentioned, Brower and Jerome in Arkansas were the most eastward camps that were set up, and really segregated people from their home, like took them so far away. So here are the actual camps today. Brower and Jerome are really, really close to each other. It was like a 20-minute drive. The only thing left today that stands in both camps is the smokestack from the medicine clinic. Otherwise, there's very little evidence of it ever being there. Brower is where George Takei was interned. And so you can visit that site and walk through a narrated tour that he has done but otherwise pretty desolate in the middle of nowhere. So this is at the Rower site. This is a war memorial and also a memorial for those who had died in the service and those about just their internment in the camp in general, marking their place that they were there. It also serves as a cemetery. There are people that died in this camp and taken far away from their homes, and this was the last thing or last place that they got to be on this earth, which can be pretty heavy. Um, but these two memorials are there today. This is at Jerome. Jerome is a lot less uh, extensive memorial. There just stands the relocation center like statue plaque to the left, and again, the only thing that really remains physically of the camps is that smokestack from the clinic on the right, also in the middle of nowhere. Here we are at the museum. Steve and Momo bought shirts. Um, Momo is Ray's daughter and Steve's granddaughter, and they're showing it off. This museum was really great. We got access to a lot of hands-on materials. They let us go through binders and books and had them out so people could, identify stuff that their loved ones or things that their like loved ones had left, which we learned a lot, I thought. Here is a war stamp book again. You can see that it had the little war ration stamps on the bottom. So like again, like Ray was saying, you couldn't turn in stamps without it being ripped off in front of the people that took them. Um, so here just that like it exists because it still has remaining stamps in it. Here is a little ticket for a birthday ball. So they also did events and parties sometimes at the centers. And we thought that this was a little fun that like they had a raffle and the first prize is a luggage set 3-piece and then luggage set 2-piece and then one suitcase. Um,
Like they're eager to leave.
like they're eager, yeah, they're eager to get going. Do you guys want to talk about baseball or do you want me to?
They had an all-star. Well, baseball is extremely popular in Japan and among the Japanese Americans, and at that time was the nation's most popular, the U.S. nation's most popular sport. And so they had a game between the inmates of the camp, or the all-star team from the inmates of the Arkansas camps, and the U.S. Army. So you can see Camp Shelby 9 to tackle Center Stars. And so they had a two-game series. On the next slide, you'll see the baseball ticket. There you go. All right, keep going, Katie.
Yeah, so this is a picture again inside one of the co-op stores. You can see the registers and people buying things as well. The next picture is actually they kept a very detailed account of all the co-op structure and what the co-ops were. And so I thought that I found this little graphic while we were looking through books that I thought was so great, explaining to people how the co-op worked. The first picture depicting a profit store, that there's someone that makes profits and runs away with it, where the co-op you pay money in and you get that dividend. Um, I also thought it was funny that this was the first time I learned about S&H green stamps. Like Ray and I didn't know what they were, and I was like so perplexed with
I knew
this
what they
new
were.
concept. Yes, I was yeah, I was perplexed, but this is a depiction of that. Is this is a receipt, right? Like one of those dividends from Jerome to show that like that co-op system was really in use. This is a little model of one of the barracks that was in the museum. You can see that this would hold several families. Um, and it was really, really cramped inside. They were offered a little wood stove and then like curtains to partition, but there was virtually no privacy in the barracks. And to our knowledge, and this is what the National Park Service said, is that there were no barracks that are still out there that the National Park Service has access to, that either they're demolished or used and repurposed in other towns, which from great connections, um, that Dr. Feller made and Ray Feller made, and I, Dr. Feller, we actually got to see a barracks, for real. So this is an Episcopal church. Is it an Episcopal church? Yeah, an Episcopal church that had been run down in town, but the building structure to the right that Ray is highlighting is actually an old barrack in the camps. So we had the privilege to go inside and see what that would be like. It's a picture of us outside of it.
Okay. So that last picture was Arkansas City, and we made connections. I would say is and the former Speaker of the House of the Arkansas Legislature showed us around, and he knew about it. Well, so this
Just to add to that, it was actually amazing. Everywhere we went, people knew about it. When we told
yeah
people, because they all knew, I mean, these are tiny towns, so they knew we weren't from there, especially when
yeah they knew.
a certain someone's accent was especially noticeable. Um, and everybody they knew about the camps. The waitress at the first restaurant we went to gave us the phone number for the mayor so that we could talk to him about what he knew about the camps. They were very friendly and very aware.
Amazing, very friendly. And by the way, so the restaurant was in the middle of nowhere, which was recommended by the owner of the bed and breakfast we stayed at. It was excellent. Rick, the steak was amazing.
Steve is a foodie. For those of you who don't know Steve, he is.
Oh,
We
what a place! We went twice to the steak place.
It was good.
every trivia game we're talking about food for at least 10 or 15 minutes, I'd say.
So this is from Jerome.
Mhm.
It looks like a book of coupons again, except it says PW camp now. So after it was the Japanese American civilian camp, and the people were sent back to California or West Coast, it became a Japanese prisoner of war camp, which had its own money system according to the Geneva Conventions. So you can see these tickets are printed in Arkansas, and it's a booklet of PW. They were paid 10 cents an hour, 80 cents a day, which is comparable to what the Japanese American citizens were paid. Go ahead. So this is a complete set of the actual PW camp, prisoner of war camp, in Jerome, Arkansas. Go ahead. Okay, we're almost at the end of the thing. Here is a U.S. Treasury check from 1992, October the 1st. If you can believe it, eventually the United States admitted that the Japanese Americans were mistreated, and Congress passed a law compensating the Japanese Americans who had been in the camps $20,000 a person. This is under President Reagan. By the time they got paid, it was under President Bush, the older one. And so this is one of the actual checks paid out for $20,000. A fairly modest compensation for taking years away from people's lives. The German Americans, there were some German Americans and some Italian Americans, not as many as the Japanese Americans, who were also put in camps. Mainly in their case, they were not rounded up like Japanese Americans, but rather they were family members of German and Italian citizens who were in the United States on business, or they had lived here for years. But if they were born in the United States, and this is a current issue, you are a U.S. citizen, even to this day, so long as the courts uphold it.
Maybe not tomorrow, but today.
Today, they are still a U.S. citizen. Next slide. This is the last slide. I love the picture. in the Japanese American Internment Camp Museum, Katie explaining to Momo some of the pictures of the camp itself, and what you're looking at are books, yearbooks from the camps or from the schools, scrapbooks, coupons that were loose. They just let us look at everything. So we took pictures again in Arkansas. It's in the train station where the Japanese Americans came in. The train stations between the two campsites. So it's a beautiful picture in my mind of the next generation for me. That's Katie, or maybe two generations, and two generations also Momo. All right, and that I believe is the last slide. Okay. So if you have questions, we can certainly entertain some questions, but it's a story I think we should tell. We shouldn't
Did you
forget
go
about
to Manzanar? Did you also go up to
it.
Manzanar?
These are the four camps we went to, the two in Los Angeles area, Pomona and the Santa Anita, and the two in Arkansas. We didn't go there yet.
And
I went to one in Texas too.
Oh, yeah.
Fresno actually has a lot of memorials too to the people that were interned. It's very interesting. I have a friend who both parents were in camps, different camps. So yeah, it's a sad story, but
yeah, it's one we shouldn't forget. Ray mentioned that in Crystal City, Texas, near the Mexican border, we housed the 3,000 plus families of both German and German Americans and Japanese Americans. And we did visit that site as well. Yes, but you're right. Manzanar is a well-known one of the camps.
You just have to come back.
it's very interesting and it's in a real, I guess I'll say hellhole because I shouldn't say that word, but because it gets cold, very, very cold and very, very hot and in a horrible place.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
that was one of the complications because people, when they left, they didn't know where they were ultimately going to be, and so they packed as well as they could, but there was no way to anticipate some of these environments and so on.
But there's still a lot there that you can see in the way that they lived, and it's very interesting. And like people that could sew, were highly regarded because they had skills, and it's very interesting how that all.
Yes.
Yeah, it requires a lot of creativity to figure out how to, what are you going to wear and how are you going to stay warm and how are you going to make this feel livable?
If there's anybody on the screen from our group who has not been to Manzanar, it's worth the drive. I got to tell you, it really, it's a day well spent. Yeah, Mitch?
Couple of things. When I lived in Silmar, what?
Gail also had her hand up. Go ahead, Mitch.
Oh, okay. When I lived in Silmar, a guy who lived across the street, Lonnie Tanaka, he was at Manzanar, and then he volunteered for the war. He was in the 442. Also in El Sereno, when I was teacher there, there was I forgot his name. He was also in the 442. There were two actually at El Sereno that were in the 442. Anyway, Lonnie so he gets out of the army and he meets somebody and they get married, and he buys a house in San Fernando for the GI Bill. They were able to purchase. So he buys a house around 1946 or 47, and somewhere around 1951 or 52, maybe a little later, they decided they were going to build the 5 freeway.
Oh no.
And they threw him out because the 5 freeway went right through his neighborhood.
Oh,
So eventually he moved here and there and ended up in my neighbor in Silmar. An interesting guy to talk to. He and my father, when my father would come out to visit, my father served in the Philippines, but my father knew a lot of stuff to talk about the war, at least, and they would chat a lot about the war. on the other thing, back in 2015 or 16, we were in New York and we went to a Broadway show called Allegiance.
Hmm.
And Allegiance is a musical. If it ever comes around in a traveling show or something, you should go see it. It was not based necessarily on George Takei's life, because he was 5 years old when he entered but it was really based on things that he remembered and what his family remembered. And they wrote this musical. It was amazing. It was great. And he was in it.
Oh,
Yeah, he happened to be in it. Because we caught it in the beginning. So, in the beginning you see the stars.
Yeah.
So it was great. If it ever comes around, go see it.
Okay. Gail?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a former dental hygienist, and when I lived in the Antelope Valley, I had two patients, well, four patients. There was an east side Nishimoto and a west side Nishimoto. They were brothers and they had alfalfa farms. And they and their wives, they were like in their young in their 20s at the time, I think. And they were interred in Poston in Arizona. And both of the brothers volunteered for the 442nd. And the most heartbreaking story that I've heard from someone that I knew, Mrs. Nishimoto, after her husband left for the war, she discovered that she was pregnant. And when it was time for the baby to be born, she had a very difficult labor and needed a cesarean. And there was no one at the camp that was qualified to perform a cesarean section, and she lost the baby. And that is the lasting story that I carry with me of the heartbreak of that time. And fortunately for both Nishimoto families, before they left, they had made arrangements with friends to caretake their farms, and they did not lose them. And they returned and resumed alfalfa farming.
And that was probably unusual, I would guess, right?
that
Most
was
of the
unusual.
time, I mean,
Yeah.
Ray, Steve, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think most of the times they were given such short notice to leave that they didn't really have the time to make arrangements, and they ended up losing everything. They came back and nothing was theirs anymore, was that, I believe.
Yeah.
We
A
did
lot
hear
of the time.
one story. Maybe Ray's going to tell the same story of a family in Washington, a guy in Washington who took the farm of a Japanese American who was interned, but after the war gave it back because in World War One he had experienced discrimination against Germans, and he hadn't forgotten, so he gave back the land to the Japanese American family. But I think Rick is right. In general, the
Yeah.
Japanese Americans lost a lot of money and goods and land and such.
I know I told you the other week, I told you at the game at our trivia game, that I had met a gentleman whose grandmother was Japanese American. She was 3 or 4 years old at the time, living in the Seattle area, and her family was given an option to either go to a camp or to move inland, and they relocated to North Dakota and lived out the war there. Do you know how? I had never heard of that before, that anybody was given an option. I don't imagine that was prevalent. Did you? Is that something you've heard before?
Never heard of it before.
Yeah, that amazed me.
I know that some mixed race families, like when especially the father was white and the mother was Japanese, were given the option to stay because it was thought of the man was the head of the household and therefore will follow American culture. So I have read that before.
All right, I'm going to have to check with that guy that I met and find out if that was the case for his family. Thank you.
Mhm.
Did not know that.
And I guess
Anyone-
there's some amount of time, between finding out that you're going to go, not a lot of time, but I guess there could also have just been families that said, we've got a car and we're leaving. I, I would think.
That could
You
be.
had to register, so that was risky. Okay.
Any other questions or anything? Hey, I can't thank you guys enough for coming. This has been wonderful. I've learned a lot. I'm sure everybody else has, and we greatly appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Feel
Thank you.
feel free to hang if you want to attend a kind of an abbreviated Shabbat service, or I know especially for Ray,
It's a
way
little late
after bedtime.
a little late over here, so
Yes.
I think I will head to bed. My mother she would know if I was staying up late. So that would be bad, but
That's right.
thank you all for your curiosity and interest in this topic. It's very appreciated, and have a lovely Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you. I'll see you Tuesday.
All right.
Shabbat
thank you.
shalom.